All right. Welcome back, everyone. Coffee and Contemplation, episode 8, start of our series that we were calling Finding the Center. Finding the Center's goal is to kind of look at these different aspects of our psyche. We talked about the map of the psyche in episode 7 by Carl Jung. Integrating these different aspects of our psyche is called individuation, and this process is dedicated to the real centering of our life, helping us become more authentically ourselves. Working toward wholeness is freeing in a world where the expectation of perfection freezes us. Perfect is not a human quality. Holding ourselves to that standard is to put roadblocks in the path to growth. The idea of perfection is a trick of our overvalued ego, constantly looking to resist any change we hope to make. And in Finding the Center today, we're going to talk a lot about ego as a part of our psyche and, why it's important, the pros and cons of it, because it is necessary. It can get a lot of hate as being a super negative thing, but it is very necessary to have. We need it to operate in the world. A quote here from Joseph Campbell says, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." And I think that's what individuation is all about. Coming back to the center, coming back to our authentic selves, our truest selves. And we do that through analysis, learning these different parts of ourselves and just integrating them all. We can look at this quote here from Joseph Campbell. He says to become, in Jung's terms, individuated is to live as a released individual. One has to know how and when to put on and to put off the mask of one's various life roles. The aim of individuation requires that one should find and then learn to live out of one's own center, in control of one's own for and against. And this cannot be achieved by enacting and responding to any general masquerade of fixed roles. So it's just being more who we are. I think we're a different person in any single scenario that we get put in. But learning how to take on and take off masks and living from more of a centered space instead of losing yourself in, expectations of the outside world, but just being more true to yourself. That's the process of individuation. I think it's really powerful to live from that space, but it is a lot of work, and we need to start to learn about these different aspects. So today we're going to talk about ego. So our ego, what even is that? Our ego is that which we know about consciously in our lives. It's basically the I that we identify with. It's our name, our hometown, occupations, and any other qualities that we can describe with our thinking mind. It's how we look at ourselves and form comparisons to others. It's basically our rational mind, our thinking mind, who we think we are. That's our ego. And it's a super necessary thing. The ego is most often developed in the first half of life. When we begin to develop, we are taught things about the world, how to operate and navigate in it, and eventually we find our place. This stage of ego development is crucial to operating at a functional level in the world. Without a healthy ego, we may seriously struggle to participate in daily life through school, careers, and family life. Worse yet, we may never be able to come to our highest meaning through integrating the self and other aspects of our psyche as we progress through life. We need the ego to have a firm footing in reality as we begin to navigate the unconscious aspect of life and approach our soul. Ego is a powerful tool and can help us accomplish wonders in the material world. So ego is a good thing. We need to have this footing. We need to know who we are. We need to have these roles to provide, for ourselves, for our family, to operate in the world. And then that will allow you to go into different aspects and use different tools to learn more about yourself and the unconscious and the psyche. But if you're already loose in your ego and you start to dabble with that, that can be dangerous. And I think that's where people see like schizophrenia or mental breaks or things like that, is they already had a kind of a fragile ego, wasn't fully developed, and then they have some sort of break, and now, that's not good. So we need to have a healthy, strong ego to integrate all these different things. And that comes in the first half of life. But the problem with the ego is I think we over-identify with it nowadays. We overvalue it. Because an overdeveloped ego, it's a tyrant. It can be narcissistic. It's fooled into thinking that it's all-knowing. And this quote here from Jordan Peterson, "The rational mind tends to fall in love with its own creations." We love what we know and we fear what we don't. The ego feels threatened by things outside of its control because it highlights its incapacity and lack of bandwidth. It shows where we are the most vulnerable. An overdeveloped ego cannot create connection, and it constantly isolates itself from others and the world. We all know someone who has a huge ego. And yeah, it's almost like a fear response that what I know is the only thing out there, and that keeps you from connecting with other people. It is the exact opposite of what faith or spirituality is, because it's saying I know everything, and that's where I think tyrannies happen. And these things are can start small and build out. So if you're tyrannical to yourself in your mind, I think that can transfer out to the world. So we need to be open to realize that our rational mind is not the only thing. Our egos are not the only thing. There's stuff at play outside of our egos. But the reason that it's so difficult is because, like I said, our egos love control. And if they feel out of control, it's painful, because it shows where we're vulnerable or could possibly be in danger. So here's some quotes to contemplate. All change is experienced by the ego as death. It's a long, slow process to develop into the person we are. It's by Robin Robertson. So that's why I think it's so hard to start habits or do these different things. Any sort of change you want to make is saying that your current ego is inferior, but your ego wants to hold on. It wants to continue doing what it's doing. It likes the known world. So to start something new, it's uncomfortable. It's a death process, and that's why it's so hard to break out of these patterns that we have, because they're ego patterns, they're thought patterns, and we can get really stuck in them. Here's another quote from Terence McKenna. Chaos is what we've lost touch with. This is why it is given a bad name. It is feared by the dominant archetype of the world, ego, which clenches because its existence is defined in terms of control. So I think things can be looked at as chaos and order. If you have too much order, that's probably too much ego, that's probably too much control. You need a healthy balance of introducing chaos into your life, things that you don't know, things that you can still learn or progress towards. It's stuff that you're going out beyond your boundaries and learning so that you can integrate more and grow more. But if you're stuck in your own little bubble, comfortable, it might not be enough. You still need to continually learn and grow, and this is constant. So we need to come in contact with the chaos, hopefully voluntarily, but as we kind of talked about before, chaos can just happen of its own accord. Here's another quote. The ego will endure the worst agonies of neurotic misery rather than consent to 1 minute of diminishment of its sense of importance. Once again, the ego, we would rather be neurotic, over-controlling, anxious, than surrender that there's something outside that we just need to let go and trust. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's starting to learn that there's things outside of our ego that we can listen to and start to trust. But we have to learn to let go, and that's a painful process. Here's the last quote here by David Tacey. The purpose of the first half of life is to give ego a sense of security and to make it believe it's in its achievements. The ego is the agent of incarnation, and if it does not feel grounded, the self cannot begin its work. So this is why ego is actually a good thing too, and it's important. We need to accomplish things. We need to feel good about the things that we're doing, the work that we're doing, and be grounded in that, because if not, chaos can swallow us. Like the Terence McKenna part, like chaos is what we lost touch with. Yeah, but if we're not grounded in our ego, the chaos can swallow us and we might not be able to recover from it. So cracking the shell. So I look at that as breaking through our ego. We can call it an ego death, or just, we'll call it an ego death. So throughout our journey through life, we will experience countless ego deaths. This is a continual cycle of death and rebirth as we transition through a series of identities. Some of these transitions may be voluntary and call on our persona to help facilitate growth as we step into a new important role at a job, as a mother, a father, etc. So this is almost like, to me, this is like fake it till you make it. Sometimes our egos aren't enough. We're about to take on a role that maybe we're not prepared for, and we have to kind of trick ourselves into thinking it. So we're going to put on a mask of a persona, which might be overconfidence, but this is a good thing because it's facilitating your growth by using another aspect of your psyche, the persona. So when you're stepping into that new role, you need to almost fake it till you make it. But other times, we may have the rug torn out from under our feet, leaving us in just complete chaos. Death, illness, breakups, any other unexpected trauma just shatter our current identity and rational thoughts about the world that we live in and leave us with this psychic wound we may not be prepared to handle. So Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, but it's like you're skating on ice and every now and then something comes up that just breaks you, that the ice breaks and you fall under, and that's chaos kind of consuming you. And when you fall into that, it can literally drown you. These sort of things can really shatter your worldview, your ego, how you're looking at everything. But they'll say when you fall into that water, there's treasure at the bottom there. There's something that you need to find. This is the unconscious forces of the world pulling you into a new aspect of yourself. And whether that's really, really true or not, I just think it's a healthy way to look at these things. Because if you look at it as poor me, once again, from that victim mindset, or you can look at it as what can I learn from this situation? No matter what it is, it could be all of these hard things. What can I learn to make myself better, stronger, and be able to better handle life, and just trusting in something that everything happens for a reason. So these moments are precious because in that chaos, we have an opportunity to find a treasure we desperately need. These tragic moments of life are gifts from the unconscious that shatter us open to the deepest aspect of ourselves. It helps us connect with the unconscious and the self, the soul, when we have been previously closed off and stuck in our fragile, inferior ego. So sometimes our ego will think it's all-knowing. We're in these patterns, we're confident, and then something happens that just shatters everything. Sometimes that's from the unconscious opening you to a deeper part of yourself. And I think if we open to these wounds, we can find healing and connection. But if we hide from them, we will suffer eternally in isolation. So when our ego shatters, it forces us to kind of create a connection with a higher power, with other people. We want to continually work on these things. So here's a little quote. When we grow wiser, we learn that the disasters of life are often the genius of the unconscious, forcing our egos into a new experience of the self. And that's by Robert A. Johnson. Awareness of the ego is an important first step in creating a healthy relationship with it and the other aspects of the psyche. With more awareness, we can integrate aspects of ourselves and intermittently let aspects of the ego burn off and die to make room for a new season of growth. I think we need to voluntarily, continually let parts of ourselves die off that aren't serving us. The more that we can do that, the better. The more that we can take stock of the things that might not be serving our highest meaning, the better. Because that way, when something chaotic does happen, you at least know who you are. You're closer to that center. You're closer to yourself. And anything that challenges your ego is going to be painful. Like we said, we use words like die, burn off, all this sort of stuff. This is super uncomfortable stuff. It's not easy. So I totally get why people get caught in patterns and ways of life. It's because it's comfortable. But we need to continually go to these things so they don't come to us. And that's just how I feel. So here's a quote, a little like poem thing from Aubrey Marcus that was on his Instagram years ago. But I thought it was a really nice way to look at this. So, is the forest fire a blessing or a curse? Destroyed are the tall trees that have kept time with changing seasons and provided homes for fur and feather. A masterpiece of nature is returned to ash and soil, a state of potentiality. But from that clean state comes opportunity, a chance to build a new masterpiece, perhaps even better than before. Sometimes in our life, we must metaphorically set fire to our monuments to make room for growth. a job, a relationship, a hometown, an image we project. And sometimes these things become incinerated without our involvement. Is it a demon or an angel that did this to us? Is it a blessing or a curse? It is neither. The answer to that question is solely determined by what you cultivate in the empty space that was created. So I just thought that was a really nice way to look at this forest fire, letting parts of ourselves burn off that aren't serving us, so we can grow, so we can become the best versions of ourselves and offer that to the world, because I think it's super necessary. So that's a little bit about ego. I think ego is an extremely important thing, but it's an even more important thing to be aware of. If we're not recognizing when we're in our egos, we're going to have a difficult time connecting with one another. We need to check our egos at the door, especially in relationships, in work, but any relationship, work-related things, a more intimate one. We need to check our egos and continually, keep it at bay. But we also need to be firm in knowing who we are and what we stand for. And I think the more we can do that, the more stable we'll be when we start to integrate these other aspects of the psyche. So, finding the center, about individuation. We talked ego today, which is, I think, maybe the most, I'm not going to say relevant, but I think that's the one people can understand the most. Everyone kind of understands ego because it is just our thinking mind, it's our rational mind. And now we get to dig into some more things. So the next podcast will be talking about anima and animus, which is basically just projection. So we'll learn a lot about that in our next podcast. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in again. We'll keep at it with these things.